kind of interesting. I'm over in the immigrant section of town in Portland, which is kind of interesting. This is all the 120th to 180th Avenue neighborhood, and it's really interesting. So there's this big grocery store here that's got signs and stuff on it that was made to look like Costco, but it's not Costco. I'm gonna check it out. And you know, a little side note, I'm not quite sure where I'm gonna put this video, but you know, one of the things in dealing with non-Americans in you know, kind of on-call stuff, employment stuff, is you have to deal with people who understand cash basis, which, you know, a lot of people do. But if they come from a country where there's a lot of labor exploitation and it's just common for people to get to walk by on the street while somebody else is, you know, starving or bleeding in the street or whatever, you got to be a little bit assertive to some degree in dealing with them, but because they're not going to understand that if they reschedule something, or you've already shown up and they decide, oh, it's not a good day, we got to do this another day. They listen, it's still a service call, and a lot of times they don't fully understand that. So it's you know, it can be tricky dealing with them. And you can't be overly assertive with the situation, because if you do, I mean, somebody can call the police. I can't be overly assertive with any of these people in delicate situations. So sometimes it means just writing off a deal. And it's also why, in getting involved with any larger project with somebody, you really want to do baby steps on these things. You don't want to get into, you know, let's go and do a $20,000 project, and you know, I get my $20,000 at the end. Is what's going to happen, especially with people that come from Muslim cultures, is not only are you going to be arguing the labor with them, they're also going to argue the materials. If you bought materials up front, they want to count every leftover nail. They want to count every tube of caulking. You know, I guess it's because American contractors overseas rip them off a lot, and they've all heard about it, and they're just convinced that you're there to rip them off. So you know, any Muslim culture, you're a non-Muslim dealing with them, you've got to understand that their mentality is that they consider you a thief, and they're going to treat you like that, and sometimes they're there to win instead of you winning. But if you're dealing with the highly religious Muslims, it's not like that, because I've done work at mosques where they're not like that. So you know, and again, you got to be honest. You know, we're not there to be overly assertive or abusive with somebody, and you also have to understand that a lot of regular contractors rip those people off regularly, and so it's a delicate situation going in. We look in the Middle East, the absolute disgraceful abuses that go back and forth on all that, you know, it's a situation to be very cautious with. And their concept of honor does work a little bit differently from ours culturally, but Americans' concept of honor has definitely been going downhill over the last 20 years too. So those situations get a little tricky. But I want to get back into, I'm going to do this on a side note, because we do need to have cultural awareness when you're doing this type of work, especially if you've broken out of a really bad situation and are entering a workforce in a way that you haven't normally dealt with it. And if you don't take into account cultural issues in dealing with people, then you're going to be several steps behind a curve, and you're going to stay several steps behind a curve. And that's one of the things that maybe a highly skilled guy who's really good at doing the work may not be so good at dealing with the cultural issues on the various ethnic and language and nationality groups they may be dealing with. You know, here in Portland, we have a lot of immigrant groups that are they have different cultures, and we deal with them a little bit differently. there was a project video on I think it's on my handyman stuff, but it was where I was doing a roofing job. And the guy that I was doing the roofing job for works for the government in a quasi-diplomatic fashion, I guess we could say, but he works with Vietnamese a lot. And he's not Vietnamese, but he's of an ethnicity that they are not going to be as put off by because of the way he comes across. It doesn't remind them of America's action over there. So he deals diplomatically with Vietnamese a lot, and we didn't talk about it a whole lot, but it shows that sometimes you got to put a different face on a business deal when you're dealing with people from a group. When I was working with a lot of temp agency people, and the agency, the group, the crew that I worked with was predominantly black, and we were working in predominantly white areas in west of Portland, Hillsborough, Beaverton, predominantly white areas. And the crew that we had going in was from a traditionally black neighborhood in central Portland, but it was necessary in order to assert certain issues in a way that the crew was going to be treated. It was necessary to have a white face speaking for the group, or else they weren't going to get treated right. And that was, that's been one of the things with Old South business issues. Sometimes you got to have the white guy step forward and speak for the group if you're having to deal with, kind of a white negotiator. If you've, and that's where it helps to have a mixed race group. When you're dealing with situations, you don't want to be that racially exclusive. You want to be able to have, let's say, the person who's from that culture, or at least understands that culture or speaks that language, would be the person who steps forward and does the talking. And it's also where it helps to obscure what your chain of command actually is. Because generally speaking, once you've had somebody step forward who's your representative to that other person who's capable of dealing with that race, culture, or language group, you want it to stay that way. And you want that other side to know that if they're dealing with that guy, they're dealing with somebody who has the authority to speak for it and make a decision. So I'm kind of rambling, but I want to get back into, we'll deal with the immigrant situation, ethnic group situation, because it is kind of relevant to a lot of this. But I want to get back into the reverse apprenticeship